Hey everyone, Alex here. Let's get real for a second. Imagine you re-sitting in your home office in the Hollywood Hills. The sun is setting over the Pacific, and you re-looking at your Tesla Model 3 parked in the driveway. You bought that car back in 2019. You didn't just buy a car, you bought into a vision. You paid an extra $7,000, maybe $10,000, or even $15,000 for something called full self-driving. You were told your car had all the hardware necessary for a future where you could sleep in the back seat while the car drove you to work. You were told that by buying this software, you were investing in an appreciating asset that would eventually become a robotaxi and earn you money while you slept. But then, a few days ago, the quiet, devastating realization hits you while you re-staring at an Excel cash flow projection at 3 a.m., trying to figure out why your personal net worth isn't reflecting that. Elon Musk gets on an earnings call and drops a bombshell that effectively turns your $15,000 investment into a high-tech paperweight. He admits that hardware Sen, the computer inside your car that was supposed to be the brain of the future, has roughly 1/8 the memory bandwidth of the new AI system. He confirms that unsupervised full self-driving isn't going to happen on your hardware. It's a rug pull of epic proportions, and it's what I call the $15,000 FSD betrayal. But here's the thing that most people are missing while the retail customers are reeling from this news. Tesla is using the data, the capital, and the sheer engineering audacity funded by those very customers to build a... We are talking about the Tesla Semi, the Boring Company's new channeling machines in Nashville and Dubai, and the Starship program. The retail owners didn't just buy a car, they provided a massive interest-free loan to fund the infrastructure for a global logistics monopoly. Think about the physics of this for a moment. As someone with a STEM background who has spent years building and scaling systems, I look at the hardware bottleneck as a fundamental architectural failure that was hidden behind marketing polish. When we talk about memory bandwidth in an AI context, we are talking about the speed at which the processor can access the data it needs to make split-second decisions. If you're running a massive transformer Zen-based model, which is what Tesla's latest FSD VIR and VIC are built on, you need massive throughput. If the hardware can't move the data fast enough, the model lags. In a car driving 70 miles per h, are on the 405, lag is just a bug. It's a terminal event. Tesla is now trying to pivot by offering a VFSU light version for hardware Sen, which is basically a distilled, lobotomized version of the real software. It's like trying to run the latest Photoshop on a laptop from 2012. It might open, but it's not going to do the heavy lifting. This brings me to a perspective I've gained from years of being an angel investor and watching 9 out of 10 pitches completely fail. Most founders sell a vision to bridge the gap between their current lack of resources and their ultimate goal. Tesla sold the FSD vision to retail buyers to generate the cash flow needed to survive the production hell of the Model 3 and the development of the Semi. Now that the Semi is actually hitting the road with real companies like ISO Logistics, the retail donor class is being told their contribution was appreciated, but their hardware is obsolete. Let's look at the actual unit economics of the Tesla Semi, because this is where the real money is hiding. ISO Logistics, a major freight broker, just started a 3-week pilot program using the Semi on active freight lanes. They aren't doing this for the gram or for a press release, they're doing it because they want to see if the advertised specs hold up in the brutal reality of heavy trucking. Tesla says the Semi can do 500 miles on a single charge and consumes under 2 kilowatt-hours per mile. In the real world, early data from companies like DHL and ArcBest is actually showing better performance, with some logs hitting 1.55 kilowatt-hours per mile. If you're running a fleet, those numbers are a total game changer. We are talking about a massive reduction in fuel costs and maintenance. But the barrier to entry for a fleet is the massive upfront cost of the trucks and the charging infrastructure. This is where a company called Allieth comes in. They are introducing a Tesla Semi-as-a-Service model. Think about that. Instead of a trucking company dropping millions on a fleet and megachargers, Allieth buys the hardware and rents it back to them as a bundled monthly operating cost. This is the classic Silicon Valley playbook, turning a high CapEx hardware problem into a predictable SaaS-style recurring revenue stream. It removes the friction of deployment. If this breakdown is bringing you value, a quick like tells YouTube to spread this message further. It helps the algorithm recognize that we're diving into the actual business logic here, not just the hype. Now, let's pivot to the bigger picture of how this ecosystem is scaling. While Tesla is figuring out the Semi, the Boring Company is quietly deploying its Proof-Rock MB2 machine in Nashville. This isn't just a bigger drill. It's 15% more powerful and designed for continuous tunneling. They are already working on the MB3 version. This is classic Elon iteration. Build a machine, test it in the real world, gather data, and build a better one 6 months later. It's the same thing we see with Starship. We just passed the 3-year anniversary of the first Starship test flight. Remember that first flight? It was a disaster from a traditional perspective. Engines failing, the vehicle losing control, and a massive, rapid, unscheduled disassembly. But in the world of high-stakes engineering, that was a goldmine of data. Fast forward to today, and they are catching boosters with giant mechanical arms and preparing for Flight 12 with version 3 hardware. But let's bring it back to the boardroom and the psychological reality of being a founder. I've been in those emergency Sunday night board calls over Zoom where investors are screaming on mute because the roadmap they were promised is hitting a brick wall. Tesla is facing a massive pivot versus persevere dilemma with its consumer fleet. Do they admit the hardware is a dead end and face the legal fallout, or do they keep stringing the customers along with light versions of the software? The decision to offer discounted trade-ins for vehicles is a strategic move to churn the old fleet and move the liability off the books. It's a brutal way to treat your most loyal fans, but from a cold, rational business perspective, it's about survival and resource allocation. They are moving the compute-intensive development to where it matters most, the robots and the trucks. Think about the illusion of high paper valuations versus actual free cash flow. Tesla's valuation has been propped up for years by the promise of a robo-taxi fleet that would turn every driveway into a goldmine. Now that the hardware reality is setting in, that valuation is under threat. If the consumer fleet can't achieve full autonomy, the narrative shifts from a tech company with infinite margins to a high-efficiency hardware manufacturer. That's a very different multiple on the stock market. I've seen this happen before in my own ventures. You have a product that everyone loves, but the cost to scale it or the technical debt you've accumulated makes it impossible to hit the next milestone without a radical shift. You're staring at the striped dashboard as your growth plateaus because the core promise of the product isn't being met. You see the founders throwing chairs in a glass-walled conference room because one side wants to come clean and the other wants to keep the hype train moving to secure the next round of funding. The hidden scaling costs of tech infrastructure are no joke. The memory bandwidth issue in Hardware 3 isn't something you can just patch with a software update. It's a physical limit of the silicon. When Tesla moved to they didn't just make it faster. They redesigned the entire communication bus between the processor and the memory. They realized that the transformer models they need to solve the edge cases of driving require a level of data movement that they simply didn't anticipate in 2016 or 2019. It's like building a beautiful 5-bedroom house, but realizing the foundation can only support 2 floors. You can try to reinforce it, you can move the furniture around, but you're never going to get that 3rd floor without tearing the whole thing down. And while this is happening, the logistics world is watching the Semi with greedy eyes. The efficiency gains are too big to ignore. If you can move freight at 1.5 kilowatt-hours per mile, you can undercut every diesel trucking company in the country. This is the real mission. The consumer cars were the Trojan horse. They allowed Tesla to build the battery supply chain, the charging network, and the AI training clusters. The retail owners paid for the R&D so that Tesla could eventually dominate the global movement of goods. It's a masterclass in using marketing arbitrage to fund industrial revolution. You spend millions on Meta and Google ads to find the people willing to pay $15,000 for a beta test software. And you use that cash to build the factories in Giga Nevada that will churn out the trucks that replace the entire... I remember a moment in my own career, sitting in a Century City high-rise at 2 a.m. watching big law attorneys review a 100-page M and a contract. We were selling a piece of my company, and the due diligence was brutal. They were looking for every flaw, every unfulfilled promise to a customer, every technical debt we had swept under the rug. Tesla is going through a version of that right now, but instead of a few attorneys, it's the entire world watching their software releases. The sentiment in the comment sections of these update videos is shifting. People are waking up to the fact that their appreciating asset is actually just a car that gets older every day. There's a comment I saw that really stuck with me. I feel like an interest-free loan for a billionaire's dream. That's a heavy realization. But from the perspective of someone who has hit financial freedom, I also see the other side. Money loses its initial meaning once you have enough of it to cover your needs. For someone like Musk, it's not about the $15,000. It's about the total compute power available to solve the problem of autonomy. If he has to sacrifice the goodwill of a few 100,000 early adopters to ensure the survival of the vision and the success of the Semi and Starship, he'll do it in a heartbeat. It's the cold logic of the engineer. You optimize for the system, not the components. Let's talk about the boring company in Dubai for a second. The construction mobilization there is a sign that international governments are starting to buy into the vision of high-speed underground transit. They are starting with precast concrete segment production. This is an old-school industrial process being managed by a high-tech company. It's the convergence of heavy infrastructure and software iteration. The Dubai Loop is an ambitious project, and if it works, it becomes the blueprint for every major city in the world. Again, this is where the capital is going. Not into fixing the sensors on your 2020 Model Y, but into the machines that will dig the tunnels of the future. The SEC and other regulators are likely watching the FSD hardware admission very closely. When you sell something as full self-driving, and then later admit the hardware can't do it, you're entering a legal minefield. We've seen the HR departments of these big tech companies processing mass layoffs on random Tuesdays to keep the margins lean while they navigate these crises. Tesla is lean, but they are also exposed. The plan to use microfactories in major cities to upgrade existing vehicles is an interesting idea, but the logistics of replacing the onboard computer and the entire camera suite on millions of cars is a nightmare. It's more likely a way to pacify the loudest critics while they wait for the majority of the old fleet to be traded in for I models. As a founder, I've had to make those hard calls. I've had to tell a team of developers that the code they spent 6 months on is being scrapped because the market shifted or the technology evolved. It sucks. It's a gut punch. But if you don't do it, you sink the whole ship. Tesla is scrapping the dream of hardware FSD because it's the only way to move forward with the power of I and whatever comes next. The lesson for us as investors and entrepreneurs is to always look at the underlying unit economics and the hardware limits. Don't get blinded by the software hype. Software is fluid, but hardware is a physical reality. The post-exit mindset I've adopted involves looking for assets that have a real tangible moat. The Tesla Semi has a moat. The Boring Company has a moat. Starship has a massive moat. The consumer FSD software, not so much because it's tied to hardware that is already obsolete. If you want to build something that lasts, you build the infrastructure. You build the tunnels, the trucks, and the rockets. You use the consumer hype to get you off the ground, but you never lose sight of the industrial reality. In the end, the $15,000 betrayal is a bitter pill for the retail buyer, but it's a footnote in the history of Tesla's move toward becoming a global logistics and AI powerhouse. The real story isn't the software that didn't work, it is the data that was gathered while it was trying to work. That data is now being fed into the Semi, the robots, and the next generation of transport. We are seeing the transition from a car company to a systems architecture company. It's messy, it's expensive, and it's leaving a lot of early adopters in the dust. But that's the nature of the game in Silicon Valley. You either adapt or you become a legacy system. So the next time you see a Tesla Semi on the highway, remember that its brain was built on the backs of thousands of retail owners who paid for a dream that their own cars would never realize. It's a brilliant, brutal, and incredibly effective way to fund a revolution. Whether you think it's ethical or not is a different question, but from a business and engineering standpoint, it's one of the most successful capital operations in history. The logic is rigorous, the data is coming in, and the system is scaling. Just make sure that the next time you buy into a vision, you check the memory bandwidth first. Stay sharp, watch the numbers, and I'll see you in the next one.